I knew what kind of weekend it would be the moment Mom opened the door and glanced at my blazer. That blazer's practical, she said, her smile polite but thin. No welcome home, no hug. Just a quick scan from head to toe and a verdict on my wardrobe. I stepped into the green estate, inhaling the familiar scent of cinnamon and pine cleaner. The foyer gleamed. Everything was just as I remembered, spotless and intentional. A fall-themed centerpiece anchored the hall table, and the family portraits on the staircase hadn't moved an inch. Neither had the hierarchy they represented. My old Subaru looked laughably out of place beside Andrew's gleaming Range Rover and Lily's sleek black Mercedes rental in the driveway. Still, I'd parked it there anyway on purpose. No shame in practicality. I wheeled my small duffel behind me, the soft thump of its wheels almost drowned by Margaret's heels clicking toward the kitchen. Dinner's at 6, she called over her shoulder. We're doing cornbread casserole, Jessica's request. You'll freshen up before, of course. Upstairs, the guest room smelled like lemon polish and starched sheets. My room had long ago been converted into a reading lounge, complete with white armchairs no one ever sat in. I changed quickly and stood by the mirror, adjusting my hair. In the hallway, I passed Grandpa Henry's old study, now Thomas's home office. The door was shut tight. Downstairs, the dining room was set like a magazine spread. Crystal glasses. Polished silverware. Margaret's signature napkin fold, the kind she'd learned at some event planning seminar back in 2004. Jessica greeted me with a warm squeeze of the arm, whispering, "I'm glad you made it," before slipping into her seat across from me. Andrew was already mid-monologue when Saturday, we closed the Series C round last month, oversubscribed, of course. The VCs practically begged. Did you tell them you're agreeing? Lily asked dryly, sipping from her water glass. That usually works. Thomas chuckled. Well, the green name has opened a few doors in our time. I smiled faintly and unfolded my napkin. Something's never changed. Rachel, Margaret said, turning toward me with practiced warmth. How's the consulting going? Still freelance. It's steady, I replied. I like the flexibility. Her lips pursed. Of course. Though I do wish you'd finish that law degree. You were so promising, and Lily, well, she followed through. Lily's eyes stayed on her plate. I found other paths, I said, quietly. That's one way to put it, Thomas added. Still, there's nothing like a proper degree and firm behind you. Makes things easier when you're navigating real estate or family trusts. The air shifted slightly. Jessica shot me a sympathetic glance. I took a sip of water and looked out the tall windows. Beyond them, the maple trees in the yard were losing their color. The same ones Grandpa Henry used to rake into enormous piles and let us jump into before Margaret made him stop because of the allergens. We moved to the main course. Margaret's cornbread casserole was perfect, as always. Even comfort food came with high expectations in this house. As a matter of business, Thomas began, folding his napkin precisely. We'll be reviewing family holdings this weekend. I've had a preliminary offer on the Lakeview property. I paused mid-bite. Lakeview? It's underperforming, he continued. And the market's ripe for redevelopment. We'll vote Sunday afternoon after the review. I looked down at my plate. Lakeview wasn't just land. It was the heart of Grandpa Henry's legacy. The place where he taught me how to read stock reports on a folding chair by the lake. Where he once said, the one who waits quietly often owns the table in the end. Rachel. Margaret's voice broke through. You remember Lakeview, of course. We used to take picnics there, back when your father still wore polos. I nodded. I remember. It's time to let go of nostalgia, Lily said. Land is land. You either hold or sell. And frankly, it's inefficient to hold. Thomas grinned. Maybe you can do the math for us, Rachel, unless that's too pedestrian now. A soft laugh passed around the table. Even Jessica smiled uncomfortably. I swirled the wine in my glass slowly, watching the deep red ripple against the crystal. I let the silence hang a beat too long. Then I smiled. Just enough to be polite, just enough to make them wonder. Actually, I said, voice calm, even I might have something to add. Lakeview wasn't just land. It was the place where Grandpa Henry taught me the rhythm of the market by pointing at pond turtles. They move slow, he'd say, tapping the worn notebook on his knee, but they always know when it's time to surface. Now, I sat at the polished mahogany table in our sunroom, staring at a printed slide titled Legacy Optimization Plan, with a turtle nowhere in sight. Margaret poured coffee into sterling carafes as Thomas clicked through the PowerPoint. The room smelled like lemon wax and croissants. A soft jazz playlist hummed in the background, pretending this was still a casual family weekend, not a hostile vote in disguise. We're entering a liquidity window, Thomas announced, as if addressing shareholders. Lakeview's value has appreciated significantly. Timing is ideal. The developers are offering a package that aligns with the Green family brand and projected expansion goals. I stared at the mock-up: glossy condos, rooftop lounges, valet parking. A red arrow pointed to the lakeshore where Grandpa once set up lawn chairs. My stomach turned. These proposals, Margaret interjected smoothly, sliding handouts across the table, include projected distributions. Everyone's share is based on their current contribution levels, of course. Andrew, seated beside her, scanned the document with visible excitement. Not bad. A bit lower than my last exit, but still solid. Lily, across from me, skimmed the page with the efficiency of a Wall Street analyst. At least it's doing something now. That land's been sitting idle since Henry passed. This is how you create value. It already had value, I said, my voice calm but firm. Community space, historical ties. There are alternatives, partnership models, even green zoning initiatives that would preserve the property. Andrew snorted. That's adorable. Jessica looked up sharply. She's not wrong. Margaret frowned. Rachel, we appreciate your sentimentality, truly, but nostalgia isn't a strategy. Lily didn't even look up. It's just land. We're not a nature preserve. I felt the familiar warmth in my cheeks, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I folded the proposal neatly in front of me. Grandpa believed Lakeview wasn't about return, it was about roots. Thomas gave a polite laugh. And roots don't pay taxes, sweetheart. Unless there's a major stakeholder we've forgotten, he continued, resting both hands on the table. The vote proceeds tomorrow as scheduled. Majority rules as per the Green Family Trust structure. At the edge of the table, Mr. Caldwell cleared his throat, a soft, barely audible noise. He hadn't spoken all morning. His pale hands were folded over a leather-bound notebook, the kind Grandpa once used. Thomas glanced at him briefly, then looked away. The meeting rolled forward. When I reached for my coffee, I felt paper brush my fingers. Jessica had slipped me a note beneath the table. Her handwriting, always precise. You told me you'd say something. I tucked it into my pocket. The rest of the session dragged on, filled with discussions about tax advantages and projected amenities. Every time I opened my mouth, someone spoke over me. I stopped trying halfway through the pastries. Later that evening, back in my Airbnb 5 minutes from the estate, I sat at the small wooden desk and opened my laptop. The heat clicked on behind me, pushing warm air into the quiet room. Outside, a gust of wind sent dry leaves scratching against the windowpane. I entered a password into a secure folder labeled Summit Bay Holdings. Inside was every document I'd spent the last 8 years building in silence: property acquisitions, legal protections, financial statements. And at the center of it all, the deed to Lakeview, purchased 6 months ago through the LLC Grandpa's old advisor, helped me set up. I clicked the PDF. The title header read, Summit Bay Holdings, LLC, Property Title, Lakeview Parcel 1, Parcel 2. The ownership was real. Quiet. Untouchable. I leaned back in my chair, heart calm for the first time that day. If they wanted a vote, they'd get one. But they had no idea who they'd be voting with. They all laughed when I moved into a 1-bedroom above a laundromat. Margaret called it industrial, which was her way of saying beneath you. Andrew said it smelled like detergent and failure. I said nothing. That building now anchors a strip worth $3.2 million. I sat on the edge of the guest bed in my childhood home, the air thick with lavender linen spray and old expectations. Outside the window, the oak tree I used to climb swayed in the night breeze. On the desk beside me, my laptop blinked softly, an unopened message from Mr. Parker waiting. I opened it. Inside were the final documents I'd been preparing for years. Legal paperwork. Ownership transfers. Corporate layers so precise even a trained estate lawyer would have needed days to unravel them. But it didn't start here. It started a decade ago when I was 22 and scared. After I dropped out of law school, a decision no one in the Green family understood, I took my savings and bought a small duplex in a transitioning neighborhood. One side had cracked tile and leaking pipes. The other had a tenant who paid late but brought me fresh tamales when she could. I lived in the worst unit, patching drywall on weekends, learning plumbing from YouTube, budgeting like my life depended on it, because it did. The family didn't notice. That was the point. I reinvested every profit, duplex to triplex, triplex to small commercial. I rented units out, painted them myself, negotiated contracts in coffee shops while Andrew posted from tech conferences in Portugal. I never asked for money, never told them what I was doing. Only Grandpa Henry knew. On quiet Sunday afternoons, I'd drive to Lakeview with him and we'd sit in folding chairs by the water. He'd bring a thermos of black coffee, no sugar, and a legal pad. You're doing it right, he'd say, scribbling growth projections next to little drawings of ducks. You're not chasing shiny. You're planting slow. If no one sees you coming, they can't stop you. He died when I was 28. At the funeral, Lily gave a speech about legacy, and Thomas shook hands with the mayor. I stood quietly near the back, feeling like a part of the room's structure, not the guest list. Now, in this room that used to be mine, I clicked through documents showing just how much I'd grown unnoticed. 7 LLCs, 3 holding companies, 2 trusts, including Summit Bay, which now owned over 31% of the Green Family Real Estate Trust through silent acquisitions, approved unanimously in past meetings, hidden in footnotes they hadn't read. A call came in, Mr. Parker. Everything's in place, he said. The Lakeview deed is verified and insulated. Once you go public, there's no taking it back. I'm not doing it to hurt them, I said. I didn't say you were, he replied. But they won't thank you for making them look blind. After we hung up, I sat in the silence for a long time. Then the FaceTime rang. Jessica. She was in her bedroom, hair pulled back, hoodie zipped up. She looked tired in the way only quiet allies ever look, like she'd been holding things for too long. You don't owe them anything, she said without preamble, but you do owe yourself the truth. I blinked. That's a very therapist thing to say. I moonlight as one, especially after dinner with Lily. We both smiled. Small, but real. Are you scared? She asked. Terrified, I admitted. But I'm more tired than scared. Jessica nodded. Then it's time. We stayed on a few more minutes, talking about anything but tomorrow. Then I hung up and opened the message to Mr. Parker. Typed 3 words. Bring the deed. Hit send. I closed my laptop slowly, letting the click of the hinge settle in the quiet. I sat back, staring at the ceiling, breath held. Then I exhaled. Let's see who they're actually dealing with tomorrow. They expected the same version of me, quiet, practical, trying not to ruffle silk-covered feathers. They expected the discount blazer, the neutral smile, the half-apologetic tone. They did not expect the deed. Or the man beside me in a tailored charcoal suit, holding a leather folder like it contained the weather report. The Green family library hadn't changed in 20 years. Shelves lined with books more decorative than read, thick curtains filtering Sunday's pale light. A water pitcher sweated quietly in the center of the table, beside neatly stacked leather-bound portfolios. The leaves outside were beginning to fall, like timing itself had agreed to cooperate. Thomas stood at the head of the table, posture sharp, voice smooth. Let's begin. We've reviewed the Lakeview offer thoroughly. Unless there are any new developments, we'll proceed to vote. Andrew yawned behind his hand. Lily sipped her espresso. Rachel, Thomas said, his tone performative, you hold 5%. Of course, we still value your emotional input. There was a pause, a smile from Margaret that didn't quite reach her eyes. Then the library door creaked open. Every head turned as Mr. Parker stepped in, uninvited, unbothered. His briefcase clicked softly as he set it down. Apologies for the interruption, he said. I'm here on behalf of Rachel Green. Silence dropped like a velvet curtain. Thomas blinked. Excuse me. Mr. Parker opened the folder, laying out crisp documents across the polished table. Through a series of legal and fully notarized acquisitions, Rachel Green, operating via Summit Bay Holdings, now holds 40.2% of the Lakeview property. You could hear the shift in air. Even the developer on Zoom leaned slightly forward. This includes parcels previously under dormant family trusts and acquired shares from silent partners. All transactions occurred legally, transparently, and within the framework set by the Green family charter. He gestured toward the projection screen. Titles, tax filings, notarized deeds filled the display one by one. Every file date, every signature, every stamp. Andrew barked out a dry laugh. This is a joke, right? Margaret's hand fluttered toward her necklace. Why would you hide this? I stayed seated, calm, because no one ever asked what I was doing, I said evenly. And now I don't need your permission. Jessica, seated beside me, didn't speak, but her smile was enough. Thomas's face twitched, as if recalculating every past conversation in real time. So, you've been planning this for years? I folded my hands on the table. I've been building. Quietly. Just like Grandpa taught me. His words echoed in my head. Don't raise your voice, raise your leverage. I didn't have to argue. I didn't have to yell. The numbers were already speaking. Margaret looked at me like I was a stranger. Her voice softened, almost maternal. But Rachel, you could have told us. We would have guided you. No, I said, with a smile that felt real for the first time that day. You would have explained why it was the wrong path. Lily stared at the screen. So what now? You block the sale. I declined to sell my stake, I said. which, as you know, prevents the developer from reaching the ownership threshold required for demolition or redevelopment. The Zoom window flickered. The developer said nothing. Andrew leaned back in his chair, scowling. "You've lost it." "Or found something," Jessica murmured. Mr. Caldwell, silent all morning, finally spoke. "Your grandfather would have admired the preparation." Everyone turned toward him, surprised. He simply nodded, folding his hands again. Thomas looked down at his agenda, then back up at me. "We'll need to revisit the charter." "You're welcome to try," Mr. Parker said, closing the folder. "But the foundation has shifted." I stood. "This isn't about revenge," I said quietly. "It's about legacy. About not letting something meaningful get paved over for marble countertops." Then I walked out of the room. And for once, no one followed. Funny how fast embarrassment to the family turns into visionary investor once numbers enter the room. I spent years being the quiet one, the underachiever, the green who'd almost finished law school. Now, I was apparently the future of the family brand, according to the same people who had laughed when I brought budget hummus to a holiday brunch. I spent Sunday night at the Airbnb, lights low, a cup of herbal tea going cold beside me. The silence felt different now. Not heavy, more like space I'd finally earned. Around 8 p.m., there was a knock. I opened the door to find Margaret holding a delicate porcelain teacup on a saucer. "I thought you might want chamomile," she said, stepping in without waiting for an answer. She sat on the edge of the armchair like it might wrinkle her cardigan. For a long moment, we just sat there, the only sound the quiet clink of her spoon. "You could have told us," she said finally. "We're family." I looked at her, really looked. She was still Margaret Green, poised, exacting, curated, but something about her posture had softened, just slightly. "You taught me I had to prove my worth first," I replied. She didn't argue. That, more than anything, told me she was trying. "I always thought you'd do something with that law degree," she murmured. "I did," I said. "I used it to buy your legacy out from under you." She winced, not visibly, but in the way her hand paused over her tea. The next morning, I woke to a missed call from Thomas and a text that read, "Let's discuss restructuring future holdings. I think we can find common ground." I didn't reply. An hour later, Andrew's name flashed across my screen. "Lunch? Maybe you can help me structure a few deals. We're not so different, after all." I left it unread. Instead, I called Jessica. We met near Lakeview, walking the winding path that looped around the water. The trees had shed more leaves overnight, and the air had that dry November snap. Jessica had brought coffee in thermoses, one black, one with oat milk and cinnamon, just the way I liked. "I knew you had this in you," she said, "but even I didn't know how far it went." I smiled. Neither did I. Not really. We walked in silence for a while, boots crunching on fallen leaves. "I'm buying the rest," I said quietly. "The remaining shares. I'm consolidating it all under a nonprofit trust." Jessica stopped walking. "You're turning it into something?" "The Henry Green Foundation," I said. "For land preservation. Community access. No condos. No luxury parking garages." She took a deep breath. "He'd love that." "He'd expect it," I corrected. We returned to the car where Mr. Parker waited. In the passenger seat, he held a clipboard, the final contract prepared. The sun glinted off the lake behind us as we walked toward him. At the edge of the water, I took the pen and signed. No ceremony. No applause. Just one signature and a lifetime of meaning behind it. The land was now entirely mine. I turned to Mr. Parker, handing the papers back with steady hands. "Let's make it official," I said. "No condos. No sale. Just roots." I used to sit on this land and wonder if I'd ever be enough for them. Now I sit here and know I never needed to be. Spring had softened the edges of Lakeview. Where once the path was gravel and thorns, now there were winding garden trails edged in native flowers. Children ran along the wooden dock with sticky fingers and juice boxes. Laughter echoed through the trees like wind chimes. We called it a soft opening, no press, no ribbon cutting, just families from the neighborhood, a few nonprofit partners, and the occasional dog dragging its owner toward the water. Jessica stood by the new kiosk, handing out bookmarks and seed packets with the Henry Green Foundation logo. "Plant something that lasts," they read. "You nervous?" she asked as I passed by. "No," I said. "Just full." It wasn't pride. Not exactly. It was steadiness. Like after years of treading water, I'd finally found solid ground. Near the pond, a little girl tugged at my sleeve. Her hair was wild, and she wore one rain boot and one sneaker. "Is this your land?" she asked, squinting up at me. I knelt down. "It's for everyone now." She nodded solemnly, then ran off chasing a dragonfly. From across the park, I saw Mr. Caldwell approaching, a small envelope in hand. "This belongs to you," he said gently, offering it without explanation. Inside was an old photo, grainy, faded, but unmistakable. A younger me, maybe 5 years old, holding Grandpa's hand near the same lake. He was mid-laugh, caught in motion, and I was staring up at him like he'd hung the moon. I swallowed against the lump rising in my throat. "He carried that in his briefcase," Caldwell said. "Even after you left for school." "Thank you," I whispered. The sun had started dipping, gold stretching across the lake like a benediction. I wandered toward the path that led to the garden, my garden, now, but not just mine. A car idled on the gravel near the entrance. I recognized the silhouette behind the wheel before I saw his face. Thomas didn't get out. He just sat there, watching. I met his gaze for a second, then turned back toward the garden. Margaret wasn't there. Neither were Andrew or Lily. And that, too, was okay. I walked the path alone, brushing my hand against the rosemary and bee balm lining the walkway. At the heart of the garden, a polished stone plaque caught the last light of day. The Henry Green Foundation, for growth that lasts. No hashtags. No investors. No optimization plans. Just a promise kept. As I stood there, a breeze lifted the leaves around my feet. I thought of Grandpa's journal, of that final line I'd copied and framed. "True wealth doesn't shine. It shelters." I closed my eyes. I didn't inherit the family name. I reclaimed its meaning. Sitting by the lake that once held my doubts, I now feel only peace. I didn't need to shine louder than the others. I just needed to stay rooted in what mattered. Sometimes, the strongest legacy isn't the one passed down, but the one rebuilt with care, intention, and quiet strength. In a world quick to reward noise and show, there's still space for those who build patiently, who choose shelter over spectacle. If this story touched a part of your journey too, I'd love to hear what it stirred in you. Let's keep these stories and values alive together.